Hello and welcome to the Magic of Podcast with me, Paul Rothman. Today I'm super happy. A friend of mine has popped on to have a chat with me. It's my friend Dave Venghaus. He's not in LA. Where are you, Dave?
Atlanta, Georgia. I'm actually in Peachtree City, Georgia, which is outside of Atlanta.
So Dave is a producer and a first AD, which that's definitely something I'm going to dig into, because the idea of a first AD, it's an interesting one. Where does that come from? Well, describe what a first AD does. What is a first AD?
Well, the first assistant director is the actual title.
The actual title, yeah.
The short version is AD. But we are not the guy or girl that gets the director's coffee every morning. No, that's his assistant. That's the director's assistant. So we're very clear about that. No, the first AD is the person that works with the director and the producers, the line producers, to schedule the movie and also run the set. So my job is to actually get the film done and shot. So if you equate it to, I would be the captain of the ship. That director's the admiral of the ship. I'd be the captain of the ship. I'm the one in charge of driving the ship and keeping it on course and keeping it on track and on time. So it starts back in prep, where I work with the director and the producers and all the other creative element of the film. And I put together a schedule for the film. And then once we get into shooting, I actually run the set and also manage the schedule, which has budgetary consequences because the schedule actually impacts the budget, as well as me, of course, making the day. And I have to deal with every single department. And my job, I guess the best way of putting it is, I'm the line of communication between the director and all the other departments to make sure that everyone's doing that on a day-to-day basis.
I mean, you're a people, I gather, a people person. You're working with people.
Yeah.
And when I was on, years ago, I was in, I just finished drama school and they wanted extras, but actors to be the extras rather than extras per se, for Bright Young Things, which was Stephen Fry.
Yeah.
And that was like the nicest set I've ever been on. I mean, Stephen Fry was just gorgeous.
I've never had the pleasure, but he looks amazing.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. And he was nice to everybody, from the carpenter to the extras. And the first AD, when we were working on that film, the first assistant director, it was such a joy, because the first AD just move things along, and you give a kick up the arse to the director as well, which is an interesting one when you're working with the sort of directors that you work with.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I have to be careful. Some directors are a little bigger than I am. But, most directors respect my position on the set. And my joke to them sometimes is they get to play on my set. It's my set. Mm-hmm. They actually get to play on it. But in all seriousness, obviously it's their set, it's their creative vision, and that's my job to execute it and get it done. But they like it. The fact is, the directors don't want to be the person worried about the logistics. They are aware of it. I'm not suggesting they're not. They're more than aware of it. But they want to know someone's got a handle on this thing. They want it because that way they can spend their brain time on actors and creating the shots and doing what they do best and telling the story. My job is to make sure they have everything, all the tools. And it's a trickle-down effect. The director is obviously the person that's going to start with, this is what I need to achieve this scene and this day. And my job is to communicate to all the departments, and all of them will contribute to whatever way they need to achieve that part of the day. But I also rely on people, I don't want to say below me, but they're working with me to make sure I'm supplied with what I need to do my job as well. So we all have this level of responsibility that help feed this machine. And it's, for instance, my staff, I have the way the structure of the set is there's a director, and then there's the producers, like the Jerry Bruckheimers, who are the ones that package that's one side of the producer. But believe it or not, the most important producer on the set, in my opinion, is the line producer, and they're typically the unsung hero producers, because they're the ones that are actually boots on the ground getting the movie made. They're the ones putting the budget together, hiring crews, and they have a production manager working with them, and I then work in tandem with them. So that's how it works. And they've got a production office and et cetera, and production coordinators and an unbelievable team behind us that are feeding the machine on that side, logistics. So you're going to be handling anything and everything. On my side, I've got usually 2 second ADs a key second who is responsible. Their job is not on set as much, but their job is even more difficult because they got to think about all aspects of what's going on. They got to be constantly feeding me what I need on my set, getting the cast ready in the morning, organizing the staffing, organizing rehearsals, doing all the behind the scenes work, putting the call sheet out, production reports, all the nonsense, the paperwork that has to be done. But they're helping me. They're feeding me. I don't know if you remember, you've worked on film sets, so you've heard of a best boy.
Yeah, it's one of those elusive titles that.
Exactly. Well, basically, the camera department has a lighting department led by a gaffer. Mm-hmm. It had the lighting department's gaffer, and they have what's called a best boy electrician, best boy lighting department. And that person is the one that's offset typically, doing all the ordering, dealing with the crewing, dealing with the paperwork, making sure all the equipment's there, ordering equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Same with the key grip. The key grip will have a best boy who will be usually offset. They're feeding the machine to make sure those guys have what they need on set. I always consider my key second my best boy AD because their job is to be feeding the machine from behind and not below them. We're working with them or the staff of production assistants on my staff that are locking up and dealing with the cast and dealing with the background actors. And so there's levels, but my job is to make sure all of that is happening. My job is to make sure all of these people understand and my staff is communicating and keeping the engine running because I have to be this focal point of where the information center starts.
And we're talking about, quite a high level of movies that you've been worked on and working on. I saw, Minority Report up there, I saw, and quite a few things with Spielberg. Catch Me If You Can. And interesting, I wonder... You can see the machinery of the movie and how integral it's this kind of... It's this dance, isn't it, between players, in a sense. Everyone is a cog in this machine. And do you have a... do you have a team that when you get hired for something or you come in on something, you bring your team, you bring your guys and gals?
I do. I try to keep consistent. I try to be loyal. I really, truly believe in loyalty, and there's a part of the conversation I'd love to have about that. But when it comes to loyalty, but the fact of the matter is second ADs become first ADs and they move up. So I've gone through numerous second ADs and second seconds because they move up faster than I'm going to move up because I've been offered and people will ask me, why don't you become a production manager or line producer? And it's not an interest to me because I actually like the control of the set. I like being the guy with the walkie-talkie and the bullhorn and the one wrangling the set. I'm not dead yet. So my attitude is that if I could be able to do this and I have the energy level to do this, I want to do it. And I'm not suggesting people that are off the set don't have as equal amount of energy. It's just not my thing. Dealing with budget is not where I wanted my career to go. So, and I'm not saying it's going to stop here, but I got to a position where I plateaued where I actually am enjoying the ride right now, as opposed to my seconds. They're moving their way up. They're trying to knock me off that plateau, to be honest with you. So, but with that said, I try to stay as loyal as possible, and as long as they're available, then I will always keep them in because it's easier than having to retrain people each time. But with that said, I was in where I go. I typically, because the issue used to be if you're in Los Angeles or New York, you had your guys. The problem now is the movie industry is super transient, not only domestically, but internationally. I lived in Rome, Italy, did a movie. They said, sorry, you have to hire 100% locally here. Mm-hmm. So I had to go there and I had to hire an entire Italian staff. South Africa, hire an entire South African staff. But I like doing that. I like that. And it's a challenge for me because the fact of the matter is always everyone's language barrier. I'm like, nice. As a matter of fact, I'm humbled by the fact that every time I go to any other country, I'm the language barrier. I don't know their language. They always know my language. English is never a problem for them. And it makes me embarrassed because I don't. I always try to adapt to their language. But point being is that, so with the industry, sometimes you're not forced, I shouldn't say that way, but you're encouraged to hire locally. And I like doing that, to be quite frank. When I'm in Atlanta, I bring my key second with me, but I told them I want to hire locally. That we're here, we should be fair about it, and they have the talent here. Listen, if you go to a place they don't have infrastructure in place, then I'll take people with me.
So couple of things. Well, something that's interesting that amazes me, and I don't understand it, but LA, I'm in LA. You're from LA. Are you originally from LA?
No, I'm from New York originally.
You're
actually.
New Yorker.
Started my career in New York. I was born and raised in New York, went to school in New York, and then started the business in New York.
Right, okay. So why, LA, you've got studios here, you've got phenomenal land that's not on fire. Yeah, it's a crazy place. But, the interesting thing is there's so much more to California than we read in the newspaper. And so all the stuff that's going on is terrible, but there's plenty of amazing stuff here. And it's easy to go down this dark rabbit hole of everything's terrible, because it's not. I mean, that's not true. But why is LA? Why is it so difficult to film here? Why are they not? Why is everything going to Atlanta? And now, surely, with what's happened, we're not going to get into politics, but even politically, because it affects everything. Why are they not pulling back production here? Why are they not encouraging stuff going on here? Why is it always being farmed out? Why no tax breaks, or etc.?
Well, they did. In all fairness to Los Angeles, they finally did put a tax incentive program. But the problem is it was too little too late, because they allowed a place like Atlanta, Georgia to excel well. Basically what happened, listen, it used to be, you remember it was Michigan, it was Detroit was going to be the new entertainment hub. Then it was going to be Santa Fe, New Mexico. Then it was going to be Canada. It was going to be, and so listen, every state is trying to clawing. Louisiana was very successful for a while. Atlanta, because they have a similar, yes, more humid, but they have a similar weather pattern to California with respect. They don't have as harsh winters. The summers are bad, they're humid and hot, but primarily they have a lot of land. They have a lot of land to build on. Uh-huh. And so what happened with Atlanta was when Georgia decided to put the tax incentive in. Georgia is a right to work state as well. So they don't have to deal with the labor costs that California does, they're tied to unions. So in LA, you have to deal with the union costs and deal with a lot of labor costs based in Los Angeles, same in New York. Georgia's a right to work state. So yes, there are certain unions, they have to deal with the cost. The Directors Guild of America, the Screen Actors Guild, because they want this talent based. So they want that talent. But when it gets to IATSE, and they are covered under IATSE, but the fact is they can negotiate rates, but also the cost of living is cheaper here. So that's where they were able to. They were able to because cost of living is cheaper in Atlanta. And they were very, when I shot a film here when they started this, and I was horrified. I'm like, oh my God, these people are not good. It was like film school. Now they're doing some of the biggest movies in the world, and they have an incredible crew base now, and they've built studios out here that are, I mean, the fact is their studios are brand new. LA studios have not been retrofitted or changed. And the problem goes that they weren't willing to spend the money in Los Angeles. And the fact of the matter is LA has a higher cost of living. And I don't want to put LA down because I love it and I can't wait for movies to come back. And when Marvel started, their intention was to stay down in Manhattan Beach. And they built a whole facility down there. And they moved to Atlanta because they just could not, between certain unions, I don't want to get into which ones, but also the costs compared to Atlanta, they're like, we might as well go to Atlanta. And that's why they pulled to Atlanta and then eventually also England. So the Marvel's primarily those two. They do some in LA, in all fairness, but primarily it's there. So it's LA's got an amazing base and talent base, and their television is increasing a lot, to be honest with you. And but the problem is they don't have the space to build new stages, and no one wants to put any energy to it. So as Atlanta's building stage after, like, literally weekly, they're building stages here, and they have a lot of access to stages here. LA, they're not willing to put the work in, and it's sad because I think they've recognized that people are going to chase the incentives, and that's what's happening. Is everyone's chasing the incentives when they're looking to shoot now. And LA has never been able to compete on that scale to like a Santa Fe, New Mexico, or Atlanta, Georgia, because of that.
And then isn't that going to move? Ultimately, doesn't that move the industry away from it?
It does, yeah. It does. Yeah.
People are leaving California as we speak, and you can see, obviously Austin is becoming quite popular, and
yeah, every state's starting to build their infrastructure. And listen, they have every right to. The fact of the matter is, they have every right to. LA has got to learn how to be more competitive. And the fact is, the problem is, everyone's like, well, Hollywood's here. They're the ones moving it out of Hollywood that you're talking about, or the studio systems are the ones choosing not to shoot in Los Angeles. So it's not synonymous with each other. Everyone thinks that Hollywood should stay in Hollywood. It's not that anymore. Hollywood is a place that they can shoot, but the studios, they all base there. All the big studio, their headquarters are still in Hollywood. Now, I say Hollywood loosely, but Valley and wherever the studios are. But the fact of the matter is, the studios are choosing, and they're doing it for fiscal reasons. Obviously, the industry's changing. The industry is not the same as it used to be. And COVID shot us down a path we were heading anyway, to be quite frank with you. It shot us down a lot faster than we thought, and that's streaming. Streaming is going to be a dominant force when it comes to distribution of any content, which is sad for us as filmmakers, because we want people to go to theaters. COVID shot that in the foot, because people are not going to theaters like they used to out of fear. And until this is settled, they probably won't. And the problem, I fear that the longer this goes on, some of these chains will not be able to survive, and the theater experience is going to fall to second place to streaming. And people they're getting used to it now. They're getting used to being able to I watched the other night with my niece's, what did I watch? It was a Disney movie, Mulan. Uh-huh. And Mulan deserved to be seen in the theaters, and it didn't. So they had to go streaming. And now it's on Disney Plus, and Disney Plus is using their streaming service to get some revenue in. But the fact of the matter is most of this generation that's watching these movies they don't care. They're okay with watching them on smaller screens, and as opposed to people, I believe, like you and myself, I still love the movie experience. I like going to bigger screens and watching it. That's how we made the movies in the first place. And I'm not suggesting it's going to die. I'm not this alarmist saying it's dead, but I do recognize we are in a different world when it comes to content and how content it will be delivered. And I think people are starting to realize more will be delivered through streaming services, and that's why you see an abundance of them now.
But there's something so important about the collective experience, and that's the theater of sharing film, comedy, music, art. It's I think we've learned that in this crazy time that we're in, more than ever. The appreciation of the fact that it was funny actually. The Bill Maher show I saw the other night, and he was back in the studio. And he had an audience, and they'd been COVID tested, and they were wearing masks, and they were socially distanced. And he got down on his knee at the beginning. He was like, "Oh, an audience," but terrible audience, because it doesn't work, because it all drops the energy, and then you can hear them clapping and laughing, like they have to, rather than because they're laughing, and they want to laugh, but. Now we're in a state where everyone looks around when someone makes a joke. Oh, am I allowed to laugh? Is this accept? Oh, is this, if I laugh, have I offended some? Oh, I don't know. I mean, the collective experience in a cinema, but I also would say that movie theaters and the industry have actually done a lot of harm in making that cinema experience a great experience. Fortunately, like in LA, you have some great cinemas, and they're very they're strict. They come in and say, "Turn your phones off. You can't come in and out." If you go to the ArcLight, it's like, it's a dream. It's lovely. But certainly in the UK and a lot of other cinemas, you go and it's a nightmare. You've spent $20 on the cinema ticket. The popcorn's overpriced. The parking cost you a fortune. You take your so the costs for a family are incredible, and then you're sitting in there with people talking, looking at their phones. Yep. So the cinemas needed to take a stronger hold of the reins anyway. That was already happening. It was already the times in England, I lived opposite a cinema in Fulham, and I go on my own. I love going to the cinema. And the amount of times that I'm like, someone's got their phone, and I'm the first one. I'm like, "Oi, turn that off."
Not talking.
They don't have guns as prevalently in the
I'm
UK.
in a movie theater. People literally will get on there and have a conversation with someone, and you're like, "What are you?" Not even whisper, but start talking. You're like, "What are you doing?" I mean, it's people. I mean, I would say.
Well, no, but so in the theater that doesn't predominantly happen. It can happen, but they would be closed down quickly on them. And I think it's funny what this has done. I think there's been terrible outcomes, but like you say, it's escalated things that were already happening or brought a light onto endemic problems that were there and pushed it forward into the limelight. And hopefully we as a collective address those problems, but I'm not so sure.
You're absolutely right, because the fact of the matter is we've overpriced everything that you want to do in person. Mm-hmm. We've overpriced Broadway shows, we've overpriced sporting events, we've overpriced movie theaters, and so people have kindly. I mean, the fact is, I applaud Disney Plus for putting Hamilton on streaming. But now they put Broadway on streaming. They're actually now starting to say Broadway's suffering because of COVID, and now we're going to go ahead and put it on streaming. So streaming is going to be the answer to everything. I mean, I'm watching football, and there's not a person in the stands right now. I'm glad football's back. But it's in COVID is kind of, strangely enough, it might be the answer. I'm hoping it's the answer. I'm hoping that when we come out of this, that everyone is so desperate to get fans back in seats, they might get smart and say, maybe we should reduce the price of these things to get people wanting to do this again, because they've already gotten so used to doing this that maybe I'm hoping that movie theaters go, maybe we should be dropping these prices back to $7 a ticket. Mm-hmm. And sporting events leaves sections that are affordable for families that can't afford anything, right? Same with Broadway shows. They should have hours that you can afford to go to the theater, you not have to spend $400 for a seat, and it's just, everything was so overpriced. So I'm hoping, if all of that survives post-COVID, mm-hmm. that they get wise, that if you want to, my fear is that everyone's going to just accept streaming's the answer to everything, and we'll just watch everything on television now, and we're not going to worry about the fan experience. We're not going to worry about the in-person experience, and I hope that's not the case, especially in Broadway. I mean, movies are headed that way, but I was horrified, to be honest with you. I saw Hamilton on Broadway in person, so I didn't need to see it on Disney Plus. But when it happened, I'm like, I get it. I understand why they did it, but I'm also kind of horrified that they're actually testing the waters on what if we bring Broadway to streaming. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wow, that would be really horrifying to me, that we would start trying to supplement even a live experience like that on using the service.
Well, they did it with the National Theatre in the UK was doing a weekly production on streaming. A lot of the theaters were showing major productions, which was kind of great because you got to see them. And you're right, it's so expensive. And I mean, the interesting thing is in the UK so the West End versus Broadway, for example, the National Theatre, for example, offers tickets at £10. They get sponsorship. They offer ticket to bring in an audience who doesn't see theatre, which is so important, because
that is important.
This is all about. I hate to use the word education because it's become a political tool. Oh my God, you're educated. But I mean education in the broadest sense. I mean that, they're holding a mirror. The art, we want to show it to everybody. It's no good that it's the rich elite in Manhattan who go to the theater and go to a lovely dinner and can afford $1,000 evening every week or however often it is. It should. We want what kid is going to go to the theater and see these things?
Right? Yeah, that's true.
I want to switch back to something you said that I'd like to ask you about, was loyalty, and working with people and loyalty, and what does that mean to you in terms of the work?
Well, it's funny. The reason I wanted to bring it up was probably my favorite. I've worked with everybody, and I've been blessed. And I'm not bragging. That's not a bragging statement. That's just a prideful statement that I've been blessed in my career to have worked with Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro, Oliver Stone. I'm going on and on. Steven Spielberg, but hands down, the most remarkable person that I ever had a chance of working with is a friend of both of ours as well, Ellen Schwartz, and she's the one who introduced me to him, was Garry Marshall, and who we all know. And Garry, it's, I grew up watching his work, from everything from what he did way back when with the Dick Van Dyke Show and stuff like that, to eventually Happy Days, Mork and Mindy, Laverne and Shirley, The Odd Couple, shows like that in television. I was a kid watching. So Garry Marshall was this iconic producer, like this bigger than life human being. And when I suddenly became I was his second AD under Ellen Schwartz. She was his first, who, and I had an opportunity to work with him, and then on features, and eventually became his first AD. And the one thing about Garry was that there was this insane, no matter how famous that man was and how successful he was, I've never seen anyone so loyal in my entire life. I mean, the man was insane. It was so important to him to stay loyal to a number of people. And it wasn't just his ADs, or it was we had to think, you had to have heard about the Fogs. Have you heard of Fogs?
No.
Oh, I love it. Garry had a thing called Fogs, Fogs. And they were friends or family of Garry. And they were actors. They were actors that would only work when he made a movie. And most of them were older people. They worked like on Happy Days and Mork and Mindy and stuff like that.
Right.
And we would get this list every movie. His assistant Heather Hall was his assistant, and became his producer. And she had the list of Fogs. And every movie, you'd come into my office and go, okay, let's go over the Fogs. And I'm like, oh God. And we would get this list of Fogs, and it was so important to him to make sure the family and the friends got it, because he understood that they relied on this. They relied on him making a movie for them to actually work. And some of them, it was about money. Some of it was just to work. And some of it was just because he felt it. Hector Elizondo was the most famous Fog of all. He was in every single Garry Marshall movie. So he was the most famous Fog. But it was...
he was the concierge, wasn't he?
He was. And Hector was literally in every single Garry Marshall movie. I mean, Hector's amazing.
Scene stealing in Pretty Woman. I remember he was one of my favorite characters in that movie.
So brilliant in Pretty Woman. And I did not have the pleasure, by the way. That was Ellen. Ellen Schwartz did Pretty Woman.
Ellen was on Pretty Woman, yeah. Yeah,
she did Pretty Woman. And it's one of her bigger one she's done with Garry, and she shaped Garry. I always tell you always see an element of Ellen and Garry sometimes, but Garry, it was the most. But he was also, I remember he had a writing partner who was with him way back. He's like, Bob and I used to work at the New York Daily News, and then we wrote together. It was very funny. So Bob Brunner would always come and be a writer, and he would always help Garry, and he'd sit in the corner, and a bunch of these older writers, funny guys who would write comedy and like hand it off to like come little pieces of paper, and Garry, it's funny, give this to whoever, tell them to say this line is funny, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm handing a little piece of paper to people, so say this line. Jamie Foxx's face would always be like, what? But anyway, Bob passed away, and Garry had a memorial lunch for Bob, and I was lucky enough to be invited, and I got there, and it wasn't a lot of people. It was probably 50 people. And his son was there, and his family was there, and a lot of colleagues of theirs that came up with the years. Most people much older than I was. And I was sitting there in watching, and the thing I really noticed out of that memorial service was anytime someone got up to talk about Bob, they were talking about 60, 70 years ago when Bob and I did it, and also 2 weeks ago when Bob and I had dinner, including Garry. And I sat there going, it doesn't exist anymore. These lifelong career relationships, and unfortunately, we've become so transient, and that goes to when you're asking them loyal, there's a very transient business. And it used to be their studios had big relationships with movie stars and directors and producers. They had relationships that lasted. Studios would say that doesn't even happen anymore. There's all these those kind of deals are, and certain franchises that might exist, but primarily that kind of sensibility of making movies. And he did that until the day he died. I mean, he was that man until he died. And this man saw everything. He worked in news, he worked in television, he worked in radio, he worked in movies, he worked in theater. He had his own theater in the Valley. He even did a Broadway show. The last thing he did before he passed was get Pretty Woman on stage in Broadway. He even did an opera. I mean, at one point he was like, I might do an opera. It lasted one night. It was a terrible opera, apparently, but he did it. He did it. Point being is that he just believed in that. Part of his life was loyalty was more important. Family was more important to him. And that's why I'm trying to keep that within me, even though it's, it's hard because we are such a transient business now. And it's not a bad thing. It's just you don't find those kind of really long term. That's why Ellen and I have remained friends. Ellen is my longest relationship in the business. I've known her as a PA for her in New York, and now she produces on films that I AD for her, and we, of course, we're friends first and foremost. Mm-hmm. She taught me more than anybody, I think, to be honest with you. But so I try to do that as well. They always kind of be loyal. When she calls, I try to get there and be there for her.
It's a really interesting thing. There's always this, me moving out to LA, to America.
Yeah.
And the British perception of Americans or the business is that it's all crazy and that everyone's in it for themselves, and it's the hustle, and it's this, that, and the other. And that's not my experience. It's actually, I would say, virtually 100% not my experience. I mean, it's that apparent. The people that I've met here have been the most driven, and believe me, I take the piss out of Americans all the time. That's part of my DNA. But equally, they're the most driven and creative people that I've ever met. Most people that I've met on every level, when they talk about doing something, it's because they're going to do it, not because they're just talking about it.
Right.
And that's what you have to remind yourself in these difficult times, that's what's really important, and that's loyalty as well. And that is the essence. And it's funny, the people that I've had on the podcast and amazing people that I've met along my journey, and everyone, a lot of it has been obviously connected with magic, because that's been the door in to meet a lot of people. And you came along with Ellen to the Magic Castle that night, which was
best night ever, by the way. I love that place.
That night was a particularly good one. I remember it.
Everybody's performances were insane. I had more fun that night. That was such a great. It was my birthday.
It was your birthday, yeah. It was a killer night, and we made sure. I remember it was like, right, we're going to go see this show. I'm going to do a show for you. I think Jeff did a show for you. It was a killer.
We saw a lot, actually, a lot more than I thought we would. We saw a lot, and thank God it was right. You think about it, it was right before COVID too. So thank God we squeezed it in.
Absolutely, and and that's another thing about that need for to be close to each other.
Exactly.
That energy, which is it's an interesting thing that film does, and it also does it. Even though there's that screen between you and the actors, if you like, and it's set in stone rather than it's theatre, which is live and moves. But yeah, so that's something I found really intrinsic, and you learn. It's definitely about finding your team, and it's definitely about finding your people.
Yep,
and
100%.
And so this idea brings me onto this kind of shorthand of working with people. So if you're working with Ellen, there's things you don't have to say.
Exactly.
You've worked with people, interesting contrast, Spielberg or Oliver Stone. I mean, Oliver Stone's an interesting character. And you've done a couple of...
I've done two with Oliver. I was actually, believe it or not, I was a PA on the first one. I was a production assistant on a movie called JFK. And then we did Natural Born Killer. I was a second. It was my very first job as a Directors Guild of America member.
Nice.
As a second, I was the low ball AD on Natural Born Killers, and we shot that Southwest and up in Chicago, and that was one of the hardest. It was the most remarkable but the most difficult film I've ever done in my life, and it happened to be my very first Directors Guild of America job, which I figured, okay, if I could do this one, I could get through any movie after that. And to this day, I still say, everyone's like, what was the hardest thing you ever done? I said, Natural Born Killers. Hands down, Natural Born Killers.
Why? Why was that hard? What was...
it was, I love Oliver Stone. Actually, I think he definitely is a wacky one at times, but he's the most of all the directors I've ever worked with. You could not find a more passionate human being about what he was shooting. I mean, don't get me wrong. Everyone's passionate about the work they're doing, but the man made films for a reason. He was always trying to make a statement, political or not, whatever. He was always trying to make a statement. Back then, Platoon, all of them, he did because he was trying to make some kind of statement, including Natural Born Killers. Natural Born Killers was difficult because the nature of the film. Did you see it?
Yeah, I saw it when it came out, so I haven't seen it since.
And it was an amazing cast, and it was difficult because the film was this extraordinarily violent take on the media and the public's perception and obsession with violence. So Oliver just ratcheted it up. He just put the public's obsession and put it on steroids. Mm-hmm. And I saw an interview once, and they were saying, "Why'd you make it?" He said, "I wanted to put a mirror up to the audience saying, this is what you asked for. This is where you're getting, and this is what, this is how your obsession can create these kind of stories." Anyway, with that said, it was just difficult because by the end of that film, it was an exhausting film because we traveled, literally we were like a circus. Every day we'd shoot something, like pack up and get in caravan and move to another city. And it was amazing through the Southwest. And we were all over desert locations and towns and cities. And we ended up in Chicago, and in Chicago, we actually shot, the vast majority that we were there was actually to shoot in prisons. And we shot in Stateville Prison and Joliet. And it was the most violent, awful place I'll ever be in my life. And we were there for a number of weeks shooting with real prisoners as extras.
Wow.
And these people are all in there for a life. They're not in there for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. They're there for life. Every single one of them did something that's going to put them in jail for life, and it was horrifying. And most they were safe. We were safe. Don't get me wrong. They were terrific. Everyone was terrific, and the production kept us safe. It was horrifying just being around that energy, and it's depressing. It's sad. Mm-hmm. It's just that many lost souls in one place, and to be there day after day. And that was the end of the movie. And I remember I was beat up and wiped out, and I was in a relationship at the time, and I was like, she was ready to leave me, and I'm like, I just wanted to go home, and I was on that movie forever. And I literally was at one point going, I don't know if I want to. This is the movie business. I don't know if I want to do this. Like, what the hell? This is awful. And I got a call from a woman saying, I'm doing this movie. It's all perky, like doing this movie called Forrest Gump. And I'm like, what? She's like, Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks, and Robert Zemeckis. I'm like, they're obviously successful. And I was like, where is it? It'll be in South Carolina. It'll be Georgia. And it's going to be about a year of your life when you commit to it. I'm like, oh my God, I just got off a year of my life and I'm exhausted. And first I said no. And she sent me the script and I read the script. And the next day called and said, when do I start? Thank God. And so I went from truly, not I want to say the worst experience because I loved working for Oliver Stone, but the difficult,
tough,
toughest, but also the most draining experience of my life to the most rewarding experience of my life doing Forrest Gump. And people ask me those questions, and they happen to be back to back, and it was insane. I literally finished Natural Born Killers, got on a plane from Chicago to South Carolina, and that next Monday started prepping Forrest Gump. And I was again still the second. I was the nobody AD, I thought, but it was the responsibility was great, and learned a ton on both movies. So,
I'm sort of in that. You did. What about JFK? That was before JFK. JFK was before. I was a PA. There was an AD named Joe Reedy, or still is. Joe Reedy still works. Joe Reedy was Oliver Stone's assistant director, first AD back then. Mm-hmm. I wanted to work for this guy because everyone in New York, he was a New Yorker. I wanted to work for this guy, and he was shooting this movie in Texas, actually, and in New Orleans, Texas, and Dallas, Texas, and New Orleans. And a friend of mine called and said, we're looking for a PA. You got to put yourself up. You got to get yourself here. And I did. I got my car, and I literally drove cross country to Texas from New York and got myself an apartment and put myself in and did that movie as a PA. I made no money. I lost more money than I made on that movie just to be able to work for this guy. And also Oliver Stone was this big movie. And I said, I'll do it. And I remember we had to travel from Dallas. I got in my car and drive from Dallas to New Orleans. And we literally had a weekend to move. Then we're starting shooting there on a Monday. I get there and I'm literally halfway there, and I finally realized I'm like, shit, I have no place to stay anymore. I didn't even think about getting a place. I was so busy making the movie.
So I got there and I'm in a panic. Like, I have no place to sleep tonight. I don't know anything about the city. And I go in a coffee shop and this lady was pinning up a room for rents thing on this coffee, on this bulletin board. And I said, how much? She goes, $400 a month at the time. And I'm like, I said, where? She goes, it's right upstairs. I said, is it available now? And she said, yeah, as a matter of fact, it is. And I literally walked upstairs with her. I said, I'll take it. And I had cash, so I gave her the month rent, and I had a place to stay. I was the luckiest son of a bitch ever. And I literally went in to stop because I was depressed to go get a cup of coffee because I didn't know where I was going to sleep. And that's how I got an apartment. And I did. I got that apartment and had an apartment and was able to do that job on my own dime pretty much.
So you go from Natural Born Killers to Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, I would imagine that the atmosphere is night and day.
Yes, because the directors were totally different.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I loved working for Oliver Stone. He's just totally a different director to work with at the time, especially Natural Born Killers, especially. He's demanding and he is definitely out there. But again, won't take it from him. He's super passionate. Robert Zemeckis is. And I became Bob Z's first AD when he did motion capture films years later. I became his first AD on A Christmas Carol. Mm-hmm. And but anyway, when I did Gump, I was a second. And again, I'm the guy doing all the work for the first and the second, whatever they give me to do, the key second. So I'm the low guy in the totem pole when it comes to ADs at the time. But they had a lot of responsibility. It was fun. So I was able to work directly with the first AD and get to know him. His name was Bruce Moriarty at the time. But Bob Zemeckis set a different tone. Bob is as passionate, but he's much more a technical director. He's very story driven. Oliver is much more exploratory, kind of always trying to find the moment. And Bob Zemeckis is much more structured with respect to the way he approaches how he makes films. And Forrest Gump was very technical film. Because it was like making 10 different little movies, to be quite frank with you, Forrest Gump, because there are all these little segments. It's young Forrest life. And then it was, Forrest Gump as a teenager in college, football Forrest Gump. And then it was him with Mama Forrest Gump. And then it was the Jenny and his Forrest Gump. And then there was the Vietnam Forrest Gump. And then there was the shrimp boat so it was all these different, it truly was like making 10 different movies. But with this running thread. And that's what was really remarkable. And I remember when I was always a guy given the shit job to do, excuse my language. But so when do a boot camp, they had to do a Vietnam boot camp. And we had another second AD, Eric and I, we were sent out to run the boot camp with this technical director, Dale Dye, who ran a Vietnam boot camp. And it was Tom Hanks and Michael T. Williamson and Garry Sinise and all these other actors and background actors who made their platoon. And we was down in in South Carolina, off one of the islands, one of the military base down there. And they built a Vietnam-style boot camp for them. And we went down and would do it with them, spend the night, the whole thing. And we were horrified because I was like, I'm just there with my coffee. He's like, the guy, hey, maggot, yo, maggot, get up, maggot. What? But I was able to do that. It was really cool. My buddy Eric and I were seconds on that. And then shrimping, we took turns doing that too. We tell them want to go shrimping, and we get up like some ungodly hour in the morning and meet at the shrimp boat, and they wanted to go shrimping, and we go do that with them. And so it was fun. So we get all these great experiences, and as an AD, you get to do those things too. It's fun.
Did you know? I mean, it almost now it seems with hindsight obvious that could only be what it became. It was phenomenal. Yeah. Did you have that? Do you have that feeling about a film before you get into production when you see the script? I mean, how much is just a job? We all need to work, so it's like the actors. If you're as an actor going up for a job that you have no interest in, ultimately, but right. It's work as well. So there's that balance. I mean, your resume is pretty. I would imagine most of those people, it's like. Oh my God, Oliver, do you want to work with Oliver Stone? Do you want to work with Robert Zemeckis? Nah, not really. It doesn't matter what they're doing. I mean, how.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I mean, listen, back then, I won't lie. There was a period of time I took whatever came in because I needed to build a resume and build a. I am lucky enough now to be very picky. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because when people ask me to interview for directors, a lot of producers will say, just, if the director likes you got to say yes. I said, well, actually, no. I said, I get to choose as well. If I don't feel like this is working between the two of us, I need to be able to say no, because I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me. Now, don't get me, I don't want to sound egotistical about it, but you have to make sure that you have a connection. And if you're not feeling it, you're not going to do them any favors by taking the job. So they might love you and you might be like, it's not really. And there was a couple of directors, I won't name names, but that I got offered the job and I just wasn't feeling it. And I was like, I just don't think this is right for me. And I go with my gut. I'm 99.9% right if I go with my gut with respect to how I feel about working. And a couple of times I was like, I think it'll work. I'll try it, even though my guy is saying don't. I'll do it anyway, and it turned out awful. And I kept on going. I should have just listened to my gut in the first place. And so I trained myself to listen to my gut. So I can be picky, which is a blessing also. But I've done like a great example. Everyone thinks I only do these gigantic movies, and I do. I'm blessed to be able to get these movies, these size movies, like the one I'm on now. But like I like when I get offered a small thing. Zach Braff directed a movie called Wish I Was Here, and it was the Kickstarter thing he had done. And I was in Africa doing a movie, and I got a call saying, would you mind FaceTiming or Skyping at the time? Zach. And I said, sure. I didn't know Zach Braff from other than watching him on television. I said, sure, absolutely. And he, excuse me, something in my eye. So I interviewed with him and met with him online, and he was pitching more to me, like, I really would love to have you do the job, blah, blah, blah. It's a $5 million movie. I know you don't do these. I said, well, send me the script. And he did. And I love the script. And I was like, I said, I'll do it. And he was like, but I can't afford your. I said, don't worry about that. We'll figure that out. I said, but I really want to do the film. And I want to do it because I liked the project a lot. And I liked him a lot. And I liked his passion. And we had the best time ever. It was a tiny little 25-day shoot. Wasn't a big thing. But it was the best time ever. And he was so nice. I went up to Sundance with him with the film. And when it got into Sundance, and it was so it can't always be about the money. It can't, a lot of times it is. I won't lie to you. A lot of times you do jobs because you just need to make some cash and you have to pay the bills. I'm lucky enough now to pick movies I want to be part of, and I had the worst mistake I've ever made was Marvel has called me numerous times prior to the one we're on now, and I would say no, and I just kind of felt they just make so many movies, and I just feel like I'd just be a cog in the wheel, and the biggest mistake of my life was had that misconception about them, and now I'm working with them, and I'm not just saying that because I'm working with them now. They really are a terrific company, and I just said, and this director John Watts, who I'm working with now, he's such a nice guy, and he's so talented. To talk about passion, and he finds the passion in this project he's doing, and he did the other two movies. So, and it's so I like working with people like that because it's a bit addicting to work with people like that, and you also can feed off of their energy too. So I like working with directors like that.
This is Spider-Man 3, I think.
Yeah, they don't really number them anymore. I think they just named them. like it was Homecoming, Far From Home, and I don't know what the name is on this one yet. The Untitled Spider-Man.
The Untitled Spider-Man. When's this due for release then? 22?
My understanding is everything is fluid because of COVID, but my understanding is the end of 21.
Oh, so, wow. Yeah. That's pretty soon for such a big movie.
Yeah, it's quick. I've got two other movies. I mean, 2 years ago, I shot Jungle Cruise for Disney with Dwayne Johnson.
Right.
They pushed that twice already, and that's releasing next July. And then I did A Quiet Place 2 with John Krasinski. And by the way, amazing. I don't mean to plug it, but I'm gonna anyway. And that's releasing next. That pushed a whole year as well because of COVID. So they're hoping to keep to a theatrical release on both those films, but pushing them a full year. So.
Which is good. I was listening to something about Sony and their big releases, which have been pushed down the line, which they weren't ready really for release now anyway, so they can get away with it. But gosh, we want to see these films in the cinema. That's the whole point. That's the whole joy of it.
We make them, yeah. So something like this, especially, yeah.
Yeah, they're tentpole experiences. Zach Braff, I loved Garden State.
Oh yeah, and honestly, that was the reason. That movie was the reason I said yes to Wish I Was Here, because I just felt I just loved his directing style. And I don't know if you got a chance to see it. If you haven't seen it, see it. It's called Wish I Was Here.
Yeah, I saw it. Yep, that's with
Joey King was in it. Terrific little actor.
And his wife. It's his wife, isn't it? Plays
Kate played his wife.
Yeah. Her name's gone. Hudson. Yeah, Kate Hudson. Yeah.
Kate played it. Mandy Patinkin played his dad. Yeah, it was a great cast. Jim Parsons was in it. I'm forgetting everyone now, but it was a great. Josh Gad was in it. He played part in it. It was really
right.
fun.
He was the brother. He was the brother who was a difficult. He was a so and so throughout the whole thing.
We did the what do you call those things? We dress up in the furry costumes and all.
Oh. I think they call them furries or something like that, don't they?
But that was what's it called when they dress up?
Cosplay.
Cosplay. Thank you. Yeah,
cosplay. That's right.
And we did a whole thing at Comic-Con. Everything it was fun.
Amazing.
I'm not. I can tell I'm not a comic book guy, so I don't even know what's called cosplay or whatever. I'm not into any of them. I don't even play video games. I play solitaire on my cell phone.
Oh, okay. Well, old school video games.
I'm not. I didn't even play back then. I remember when Atari came out. My dad was all excited to get us Atari, and I was like, "Oh, it was Pong." Remember that one? I'd be too young to remember.
No, I remember Pong.
That's what back in they going up and down. You had to get it. That was the game. And I was all excited to get this game, and I get it, and I lasted 10 minutes, and I could go back outside and play. And I went outside and played. And then when Pac-Man and all those games, the stand-up games started showing up, and our hangout was 7-Eleven. Back when I was a kid, you in Long Island, New York, used to hang out at 7-Eleven. Like you'd ride your bikes down and get a Slurpee, and they'd play the video games or the stand-up games at Donkey Kong or whatever was popular at the time. And again, I just never. I would go with my buddies would do it, but I was never the one playing. My eye-hand coordination with those damn things is just awful. Just awful, and I can't play video games. I've tried. I just not. You remember back then it was just the dongle
joystick.
Thing. Now it's 25 buttons you got to press and figure out. Press the D to do this, and I'm like, well, I remember I worked with him on a movie called Jungle Book with Jon Favreau.
Yeah. And
the kid in it, Neil Setti, long after we finished the movie, I went and visited him and his family in New York, and they were so nice to put me on a guest room. And Neil said, "Do you want to play John Madden?" And I had watched people play it, and of course I've heard I love football, so I'm like, yeah, sure. I've never felt like more of an idiot. I don't know how to get anyone to do anything playing that stupid game, and it took me hours to figure out how to use the controllers. But so I'm not very good.
Jon Favreau, you brought up. Now you've worked with him a few times.
I have, yeah, 3 times.
What was it I was looking at? What was the first thing you worked with?
Jungle Book was the first one. I did Jungle Book with John with that's a little boy Neil Setti, and for Disney, and that was a combination of live action and virtual production, we call it. Then I did the pilot of Young Sheldon for CBS with John as a television pilot, and then I did The Lion King, which was a 100% virtual production, the live action version of Lion King.
Right. So that must be a totally different experience for you then with the
100%. I mean, it was funny because to back to Zemeckis, when I first got in the business, I was lucky. Like Forrest Gump was my first dive into visual effects and understanding visual effects. Then years later, I started working with Zemeckis again in motion capture, and I had dabbled in motion capture on the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. I was the first AD in Pirates 2 and 3, and Davy Jones and all of his fish pirates were all we used motion capture, performance capture technology to create those characters, and the actors would wear the suits with the markers on them, and we did a version of motion capture which we had the actors on set. Typically, motion capture actors work on what's called a volume. It's a stage with a bunch of cameras, motion capture cameras, which are really just basically taking information from the markers on the body and taking that performance information to give it to animators to reanimate the way they want to later. And you do that on a volume. On Pirates 2 and 3, Gore really wanted his actors acting together on sets. Bill Nye working with Johnny Depp. And so the actors playing Davy Jones and the fish, the Flying Dutchman crew, they wore the suits, the fractal suits on set, and we would put reference witness cameras and reference cameras on them to get the motion capture information, and then we actually photographed them for real as well. And then ILM then digitally animated around each performance to create the characters you saw in the movie. Mm-hmm. And then, so that was my first step into it. Then when we got into Zemeckis taught me how to do, and I started working with The Christmas Carol and Mars Needs Moms, and it was doing a bunch of films for him when he started Image Movers Digital, and we shot on a volume. And basically what happens with that is all the actors come on set, the volume is surrounded by a truss system. Not to bore you with it, but we shot the whole movie that way. And then what they do is they take the information, they give it to animation department, and they then put what's called virtual camera. They actually lay the shots down in 3D virtual space, but they do it, it's called in-box, we call it. And that's how we did Zemeckis' films. For Christmas Carol, we did Mars Needs Moms. We were doing a bunch of other films before the company shut down. Years later, Favreau called and said, I'm doing Jungle Book, and I want to do what Zemeckis did, because all of my animals and my environments will be digitally created, but the problem is the boys is going to be live action. So what we did was we motion captured the whole film, just like we did with Zemeckis on a volume, got all the information. They translated that into, the animators took it for weeks later and came back into a 3D environment, 3D sets, 3D characters. Yeah. And we were able to put camera called virtual camera on and lay shots down, and they could deliver those shots to editorial. Editorial then would edit the scenes together and then deliver them back to visual effects. And then we had to then go to a live action stage, blue screens with set pieces, the boy in a loincloth and a wig and rain, whatever elements, but he would only build what he needed to touch. So if it was a hill he was walking down, it was only the strip of hill he would touch. And then we had puppets for eye lines of all the animals because they were all going to be digitally created. And we had to reshoot every single shot now, live cameras, 3D cameras. And so that was the most complicated thing I've ever done in my life, to have to do a movie twice, virtually and then practically in the 3D environment.
Right.
Lion King came around. Jon said, I don't need motion capture because I have no live action anybody in this. And he said, I'd almost rather, I want to learn how to make more of a set out of a virtual environment. So basically, when I say virtual camera, it's you've been in goggles. We've all been in virtual space. Goggles VR. When you go in a goggle, you get 360 degrees. What they did is they built all the sets in 360 degree virtual space. We put the goggles on the Scout and to move around. Then you can actually build, and they actually can build out the action of the animals and the characters in that space as well, rough animation. And then we could actually shoot it. We could actually bring cameras, animated cameras, and line up shots, but then take the goggles off. And on our stage, we had tilt wheels and a tilt head, like for the camera. We had a dolly on a dolly track. We had a crane arm and everything, but they all had tracking markers instead of cameras because they were all tracking to the cameras in virtual space. So Jon was able to feel like he was still on a movie set, but actually shooting an animated film. Because if you think about it, even though it was a live action Lion King, everything was animated. Everything was 100% CG. So that was the most complicated because we had to completely rethink how to do everything. My job, everyone's job, to now work in a 100% virtual space. We're the only movie ever to shoot the entire movie in VR.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then have the voices been recorded before or?
Yes. Well, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. What we did was for Lion King, we brought all the actors in prep, and we brought them in. We did what's called black box theater, and we would hang black curtains around the stage that we had all of our motion capture or tracked cameras, virtual cameras in. And we put reference cameras all over the place. We put microphones all over the place. We had the actors come in street clothes, and we had the pages there, and Jon would work with them, and they would come in pairs or threes or fours or whatever the scene required. And I scheduled it out, and they would do over a 2 or 3 week period based on actors' availability and schedules and stuff like that. They came in, and we would record them all. Sometimes we would have a sound studio off to the side where we'd send them over if they had to do any pickup lines or sing. For instance, if they were doing any, like Beyonce when she came with Donald Glover and they sang, that we'd have a special booth for that. And they laid an original track down for everything, all the dialogue, everything. So then we were able to, when we built the animation cycle out that we're shooting, the editors would lay the dialogue over that. So the animals actually had animated lips too. So the actually animators tied their mouth movement to dialogue.
Right.
It was easier to shoot close-ups and stuff like that. So yeah, when we watched the scene, we heard the actors' voices doing the scene. So it was like watching a Donald Glover Simba running by and a Nala, Beyonce Nala running by, whatever. But it was we were able to actually watch it like it was a scene being shot and the actors were doing it, and then throw cameras on it that way.
And so are you also there for the whole voice recording side of it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I ran the whole thing. We ran it just like a set.
Wow, it's like fascinating, all these different areas. And it must be exciting, that you're constantly being challenged and progressing. And the fact that you can go into something so high end and, you're learning on the game as well.
Yeah.
And then that ability to come back and do something low budget or just old school or very simple. It must be very fulfilling to get those both experience concurrently.
I love it. I'm a very good visual effects. I actually understand it, which is why I keep getting these big visual effects movies. But I do. You're right. I treasure and love when I get to just work on a movie and just watch acting happen. And just and I crave it sometimes. I was able to do a movie called The Good Lie. It was the first movie, actually another Ellen Schwartz one. Actually, she was producing it. It was a movie I first did called The Good Lie for a company called Black Label. And it was about the Sudanese refugee crisis. And we shot in Atlanta, Georgia, and then we shot out in South Africa for Kenya in the Kakuma refugee camp. And that was probably the most powerful thing I've ever done. When people ask me what is your favorite movie and everything, if anyone asks me what the most important thing I've ever done, The Good Lie would be my first answer all the time. Reason being, it was telling the true story of the Sudanese refugees called the Lost Boys of Sudan. Uh-huh. And the Lost Boys are the kids that actually had to trek across Africa for multiple years because they were kept pushed out of Sudan because of the North invasion of the South Sudan and the South Sudanese being slaughtered. And they eventually would bounce from refugee camp to refugee camp and eventually settled in an area called Kakuma in Kenya. And this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, the world started recognizing these kids, and they were nicknamed the Lost Boys of Sudan, even though there were girls as well, but they're primarily boys because most of the girls were unfortunately taken or killed. And most of the boys were actually targeted because they were to become soldiers. And these boys, these kids, became part of a programming in the United States as well, took many Sudanese in the early 2000s, pre 9/11. So a lot of kids ended up in places like Georgia, Kansas City, Fargo, in New York. And so there was quite a big Sudanese population here because of that program. Anyway, our film followed 5 kids from leaving their home over time to adults as part of this program, and young adults as part of the program. And it was Reese Witherspoon was in it. She played a woman who helped them settle in America once they got brought to the States. And it was a fish out of water kind of story, but it was the most important thing ever because we actually had an opportunity to go to Kakuma and go to the real Kakuma and shoot for a couple of days there. And I'm sorry, there's nothing more tragic but also eye-opening than to actually go to a place like that. And we all can watch every Saturday morning those for 19 cents. You could do it doesn't even pales in comparison to what the reality is on the ground and these kids and these people like these kids that all these people deal with, and there are hundreds and thousands. And that was then. Since then, the refugee issue across the globe has just exploded to a catastrophic number between Syria and other countries. And anyway, so that when you talk about being able to go from these big visual effects movies to that, those kind of things. That was such an important movie. It wasn't a big schedule or anything. It wasn't even a big budget. And then same company, I did a movie called 12 Strong with Ellen as well. It was called Horse Soldiers because 12 Strong was Chris Hemsworth, and it was about the 12 guys who went into Afghanistan on horseback. They were the first 12 guys in response to 9/11 who went into Afghanistan, and they actually won the first battle on horseback. And a great movie also. It's called 12 Strong.
Was that those kind of against the Taliban then?
Yeah, say again. Yeah, it was against Taliban, exactly.
Wow. Yeah, that's. You hope that in the excitement about being in the movie business or in the creative business is the fact that you learn and you develop, and your eyes are open to things that you didn't know about. Yep. And I think that's part of the joy of it. I was listening to a podcast that you did. And it was just a great story, though. It just about working with actors and the kid in the Jungle Book. And I thought that was just lovely. I mean, you talked about how
the mud.
He wasn't happy with it.
I'm always that. I approach my job that I never sit back in comfy chairs and yell at people to do things, watch them get dirty and tired. I'm the mix of it. And this little boy gets the part. He's from New York, and his parents are dentists. He's not the farthest thing from a jungle boy you're ever going to meet in your life. Nicest kid, talented, super talented kid. But anyway, he comes in. He's 10 years old, and he comes in, and we had to build this big mud pit. And every day he was going to be in this little loincloth with his wig, and kids, and they had the pit to make him, a lot of makeup and everything. Anyway, long story short, there was a big, gigantic, like 40-foot mud pit and pretty deep mud. And the scene was when he rolls down the hill and he gets caught in the stampede. Uh-huh. And so we were going to have all these stunt guys running back and forth, and so we could dodge them, everything in the mud pit. But he was supposed to have just rolled down a hill of mud. So John said he needs to get muddy. And I'm like, all right. So the hair makeup people put mud on, get him muddy to get him ready to go. And they had clean mud, they had buckets of mud that hasn't been trampled in. So they brought the mud, it's still mud, but they brought the clean mud, if you may, that had not been trampled in by 25 crew members. And they were like doing this and like, it's cold, it's this and that. And I finally, I'm like, oh God. And I'm like, John's like, it's gotta be more, it's gotta be really muddy. And I said, oh. So I said, everyone out of the tank, everyone get out of the tank. And they were like, we're not done. I said, get out of the tank. And I kicked everyone out. I said, leave your buckets. And they did. I went in there, and the kid was standing. I said, you stay there. And I took my shoes off. I was dressed in jeans and shirt like this, and took my shoes off and went barefoot and climbed into the mud. And I said, and I gave him a bucket, and I said, pick up mud. He's like, well, I said, pick up mud. And he's like, pick up mud. And I pick up some mud, and I'm like, throw it on me. And he's like, what? And I said, throw it on me. He's like, I can't do that. And so I threw some at him, and he's like, what are we doing? And he's like, started laughing, and it's like, we're having a mud fight. Come on, let's have a mud fight. I want to have a mud fight with you. And we did. We had this mud fight, and I'm covered in mud, and he's just covered in mud. I mean, we're laughing, and the crew is just sitting there going, what the hell? Finally, finished. I'm literally covered in mud. And I said, John's like, look at him. He's like, yeah, that's good. It's good. He's great. He's like, let's roll down. I come out, like running the towels, and I'm like, get the towels away from me. I don't want towels. If he's going to be muddy, I'm going to stay muddy the whole scene. I did. I stayed muddy the entire scene. Every time they need something, I climbed back in the mud. And I regretted it 4 hours later. But after that, every time he got rained on, I'd literally have them build a rain tower over my head. So if he was up on the set getting rained on, I had them rain on me as well. So I told him, I said, whenever you're uncomfortable, I'm going to be uncomfortable with you. And I did. And that's how I won him over. And I didn't mean to put it that way, but that's how I got him. I wanted him to enjoy the process. He's a 10-year-old. And sometimes you have to remember, as much as we want him to be this adult and want him to be this professional, and he's carrying a movie on his shoulders, he's still a 10-year-old who has to be addressed like a 10-year-old sometimes. And they don't want to be the only one uncomfortable. Everyone is sitting there with their cappuccinos off to the side. So,
but I imagine, like I would feel that way as a grown-up and as an actor, that there is that, you have to manipulate the environment. You have to manipulate the actors. You have to manipulate the people around you. And I don't mean, it is manipulation because we do that all the time. It's not a negative thing. It's in a positive way we manipulate. Yep. We try to get something to work in a certain way. We have to adapt and we have to change our rails as we go because, some people aren't going to respond and some people respond to a more aggressive approach, I suppose. I do
with the adult actors too. I mean, Johnny Depp, I never forget, we had all the actors on Pirates of the Caribbean. We had this big, gigantic set. Mm-hmm. It was a good set. It was, when standing tall, it was about 110 feet. And we needed the thing to go like this. And so the ship is flat and tilts like this. So now it's 90 degrees and they're all hanging from the rails from the railings. And because the whole ship's turning upside down. And we had to do the sequence where we had them all strapped in and they got on the deck and everything. It was a massive gimbal, massive thing. And we go and I'm showing stunt guys and everything doing this is how it's going to work. And stunt guys all do it. They're hanging there all laughing there. All the actors are lined up. All of them. Orlando Bloom, Keira Knightley, Johnny. Johnny's looking at him. He's like, so do you think that's safe? And I'm like, I think that's safe. He goes, then go ahead. And I'm like, well, some guys just showed it to you. He's like, no, I'll do it if you go do it. And I'm like, oh man, I'm terrified of heights. I'm like, I can't do that. They won't let me. Some guy's like, yeah, come on, Vegas, I'll do it. I'm like, oh my God. They would not get up there until I did it. And I did it. And they were all like, all right. And as soon as they finished it, they're all lined up, ready to get on. I was like, oh my God. And they're all laughing at me. And same thing and on 12 strong, it was freezing cold. We had to be in this river, and I had Michael Shannon, Michael Peng, and all these actors, all these guys, chest deep in water. It was freezing cold in this river, and they all had wetsuits on, everything. And everyone was on this dock, floating dock with cameras and chairs and bundled up and coffees and teas, and all the guys had to get in this water, which was miserably cold. And finally, I'm like, oh shit! And all I heard was they were just bitching and moaning, bitching. They didn't want to do it. So finally, I said, "Give me a wetsuit." And I switched into a wetsuit, and I climbed into the water. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Watch." And I sat in the water, so I was the first thing they saw when they came around the side of the dock. And there comes Michael Shannon and Michael Peng, and Peng is bitching. And I love Peng, by the way. Cold, F and this and F, and I'm like coming around. Suddenly, Shannon's like, "Stop!" And Peng's like, "Wait, Peng, can't bitch anymore. Angus is in the water." And I'm like, "Hey guys," and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "You guys are gonna be miserable. I'm gonna be miserable right with you. So let's just get this done because I'm freezing cold." And I did. I sat there. I would not get out of the water until they were done. And guess what? They didn't complain the rest of the day. They were like, "You know what? Fair is fair." Sometimes you got to do it, and I just told John, sometimes you got to get in the mud. So, you do. You have to be part of it. People don't want to be yelled at. They don't want to be talked at. They want to be collaborated with. They want to understand that you understand what they're going through, and and I'll do it with adults as much as I'll do it with a kid. Mm-hmm. Kid needs a little more, obviously, but sometimes not actually.
Do you ever sit there when you're on set, and obviously, like you mentioned, De Niro. I grew up with. I remember getting my VCR when I was 10 years old. We had a VCR Old Star, and I recorded everything off the telly. I mean, every movie, and I can even remember I would number them in a catalog, all my films, and I remember I had the Godfather 1 and 2, The Cotton Club, Deer Hunter, Tootsie.
The classics.
Yeah, just those were, as a boy, De Niro, Pacino, Marlon Brando, Robert Duvall. I don't know. No, he wasn't in that group actually. And the names just got Goodbye Girl.
Dustin Hoffman,
Richard Dreyfuss. These people and Dustin Hoffman. I mean, Dustin.
I had Tootsie in my head when I said Dustin Hoffman. Goodbye Girl. Yeah.
Goodbye Girl. I mean, what a film! And there's a line in that film actually where the director sees him doing his Richard III, and he comes and sees him backstage, which always stays with me. And he says to him, "So, do you want to be in my movie?" And he says, "What do you want to go? You want to go to the movies with me?" He said, "Well, I can go to the movies with you, but I'd rather make a movie. How do you feel about that?" And I was like, for me, it was like, yeah, I want someone to say that to me.
Right.
I'd rather make the movie, and these experiences, incredible. And so coming back to that, are there times when you just kind of swept away by just watching the take or the repetition of takes or different takes with actors from that side of things?
100%. I mean, one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had in my life. I worked on a movie called Marvin's Room. Again, Ellen Schwartz will be the most common name you'll hear today. It was, again, Ellen Schwartz, and I worked on it. It was a movie called Marvin's Room. And when I first got the offer, it was like 6 weeks in a house on a soundstage in Kaufman Studios in Queens, New York. And I'm like, oh, God, really? And it was going to be 6 actors talking on a soundstage kind of thing. And I'm like, all right. But the actors are going to be Meryl Streep, Diane Keaton, Robert De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio, Hume Cronin, Gwen Verdon. And I sat there going, I was like, what? And any other movie, I would have just put a bullet in my head because how boring it would have been. But to watch these people act it was like watching a Broadway show on a daily basis. It was just the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen in my life. And it really, the vast majority of the movie was on a soundstage in Queens. And then we went to Florida because it took place in Florida. We went to Florida for the last 2 weeks to shoot in location shooting, and including Disney World. But that was an extraordinary experience it was because you do sit there going, I'm having this opportunity to watch these amazing actors just act. There was, again, no visual effects. It was a Broadway theater director, Jerry Zaks, who directed it. And so he directed it kind of with that kind of contextually in that in mind, theatrical,
Did you do it in order, or did you?
Almost. I mean, some of it we couldn't, obviously, because of the nature of location, but yeah, almost in order. Yeah. Yeah. Because it was a progression. I don't know if you've seen the film or not, but it's called Marvin's Room. It was Diane Keaton and Meryl Streep played sisters, and Diane Keaton's been caring for her older father, Marvin, and she's got an older aunt played by Gwen Verdon, and Meryl Streep and her son, played by DiCaprio, move in to help them out because Diane Keaton's character is diagnosed with cancer. So throughout the films, the father's going through his thing, and then Diane Keaton's going through a progression of illness as well. And it just, I don't want to give much away if you haven't seen it. It's well worth the watch. It's a beautiful film. De Niro plays her doctor. But it was an extraordinary film. And but it just, again, was one of those, could have been very boring, and it just wasn't. It was just to watch that, the acting and the performance between all these actors was just extraordinary.
It's such a, it's interesting to listen to your journey and the differences of experience. There doesn't seem anything that sounds the same. Everything seems like that's so enticing about it and so fascinating.
I started in television. Even more weird was I started in television. My very first job was the Cosby Show. I was a PA. The very first job was on the Cosby Show as a PA. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky enough to do that show for 2 seasons, 4th and 5th seasons. And in between those 2 seasons, I was able to get a PA job on a movie in New Jersey. This was back in New York, by the way, and on a movie called Lean on Me. It was Morgan Freeman played Joe Clark, the principal of the school in New Jersey, Patterson, New Jersey. And it was based on a true story of a principal that took control over a school that was out of control. And it was directed by an amazing director, John Avildsen, who you might remember directed Rocky, and he won the Oscar for directing the original Rocky, the first Rocky.
Right.
And also he directed the Karate Kid movies. He was the original Ralph Macchio Karate Kid movie. So he was the underdog director. And then he did Lean on Me, which was, again, an underdog story. That was my first. I got out. I finished that. It was in New York, and back in New York, I was so lucky as a PA. After I worked for Joe Reedy, I started with some television shows. Actually, that's how I met Ellen. We worked on a couple of cop shows like Kojak and stuff like that when Kojak came back. But I really want to work in movies, and I started working with Robert De Niro. I did a movie called Night in the City, which was kind of a period boxing movie, kind of grit of New York kind of boxing movie. And then I had done Godfather 3 with Coppola, and then I did Carlito's Way, and I was like a day player PA, not as much on Goodfellas, but then I did A Bronx Tale with Robert De Niro.
Oh, wow.
And the reason I'm bringing those back, I was like, every mob movie was, we were all New York PAs were called, and I was so lucky to work on all these great mob movies back in the day, and with these amazing directors, Scorsese and Coppola, and, it was amazing. And of course, De Niro directed A Bronx Tale. And that was another one, which was just the most. Bronx Tale was all storytelling and acting, and amazing set dressing and design, of course, there, but not a lot of visual effects. Again, not a whole lot of that kind of stuff. But it was truly about acting. Chaz Palminteri, De Niro, and I remember I just moved into Brooklyn, New York, and I needed an apartment. I moved in with these 2 older women in this area called Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, which was very, very Italian. And I'm not Italian, but I was raised by an Italian mom. My stepmom was Italian, 100% Italian. So I was raised in that kind of environment, and I always say I'm Italian because I was raised in an Italian family. And I'm living with these 2 older Italian ladies in Carroll Gardens in New York. I mean, the first time I moved there, I needed to go do laundry. It was a soap and what do you call it? Fluff and fold kind of place.
Okay,
laundry.
Yeah.
I got my bag and my soap and my quarters, and I go around. There's brown paper on the window. I was like, and I opened the door. And there's a bunch of guys, bellies out, drinking beers and playing cards. It was a social club. It was like a local social club with all these Goombas. And I'm sitting there like, and they're like, I was 22 years old. Like, who the hell are you? And I'm like, I'm Dave. And they're like, oh, wait a minute, you're the kid living with Santa and Anna. It's like, I get in here. And next thing I know, I'm playing cards and smoking cigars, and I'd hang out with these guys and then I started working all these mob movies. So I get all of them to come be extras, and I was the most popular human being on the planet in New York. I knew every wannabe. I mean, when we used to go to Feast of San Gennaro, I'd walk down and I would go with my buddies, and every other booth be run by half the people I knew from the movies or living there. And they'd be like, Davey, come here, get over here. Hey, get out of his way. take my sandwich. Here's sausage and peppers, and it was so much fun. And it was just, but so I was consumed with that lifestyle. Next thing I know, I was constantly making those movies. And when we did A Bronx Tale, we'd audition all these guys to be in A Bronx Tale. And Bob had me go in with a camera, and he said, okay, I want to get all these many real people as possible. So I go on a Saturday morning, line of people, and all these guys dressed in the 90s and everything. And this had been like 89, 90 maybe. I think it was 89. Anyway, so I got this camera, and there's a stool there, and I'm interviewing them. Like, why do you want to be on? I was supposed to put them all on tape. So Bob is kind of watching from the side. They don't see him. I can see him. Sometimes they can't. And they one by one come in, and every single one, hey, you doing? How you doing? And they say the name and everything. Hey, not for nothing, but I think Bobby and I might be second cousins. And everyone have a story. Tell us Bobby here. Is Bobby here? Tell him Joey's here. Joey, his mom's knows my mom's. I'm sitting there, and Bob would be like, I have no idea who half these people are. This one guy walks in. Have you seen A Bronx Tale?
Oh yeah, I can. Even as you're talking about it,
Joey the Whale.
I'm hearing the music. The Duke Pearson track, do 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 do, but it's just like an opera. It's so worth revisiting that movie.
Remember Joey the Whale?
Which one was he? Remind me.
He's the big Joey the Whale, the biggest guy in the movie. Remember the whole thing with playing dice, and they keep putting him in the bathroom with Joey in the tiny little bathroom.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name, but the guy who played Joey the Whale, big, gigantic boy, he comes in, he sits down and right across the camera. And I said, how are you? What's your name? His name. I said, so why do you want to be in the movie? And he's like,
oh, lost you there.
He goes, what the F kind of question is that? And I said, what? He goes, let me ask you a question. He goes, where in New York you're going to find a guy that look like me? He gets up and walks out the door, and I'm like, what just happened? It was the funniest thing ever. And Bob loved him. Bob brought him back. It was just amazing. They got the part.
That's there's the scene where the bikers come into the bar.
Those are real Hell's Angels. Those are real Hell's Angels.
It's so visceral. Well, that's interesting. I mean, it's so visceral. That movie is so visceral. You feel everything. And when he walks in and Chaz Palminteri says to them, hey, it's okay. Let them have a drink. You're going to be good. You're going to be good. And he goes, yeah. And then he throws it at the thing. And they go, you made a big mistake. You made a big mistake. And they lock the door and beat the shit out of them.
He goes and locks the door. Yep.
That is such a great, it's such a great film.
True story. After we shot that, there was a real bar that they'd all go down the street from where we're shooting in Queens, New York, and they'd all go down to this bar every night after work and go toss them back after shooting. And they go down to all our boys, all our Goombas, go down the block to the bar, and he was in the bar, but the real Hell's Angels they just did the scene with.
Right.
Guess what? They all get into a real barroom brawl because they're all pissed at each other from the scene that was shot, and half of them got arrested. It was so funny. It was the funniest thing. And that was like on a Friday night. So the next Monday, we hear this happen. We're like, what? And apparently they all got in a real fight. It was the funniest thing.
Wow. I mean, these guys are
New York back in the day.
Yeah.
Fun making movies.
And they were so inspirational, those movies. And they're those films that you watch again and again. I mean, God knows how many times I've seen Goodfellas and, The Godfather. In fact, funny enough, Godfather 3.
Okay, am I too dark in here? I just realized the sun is set.
You've dropped it a little bit on your light.
I turn the light on?
Yeah, sure. I was just reminiscing. You brought up Godfather 3, which is always a...
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
You're going to cut anyway, right?
No. We're going to keep going.
No, I mean, you're going to edit it, so you can edit the fact I just stepped out.
It's part of the joy of it, actually.
Changing my lighting.
Changing the lighting is part of the joy of this.
My own lighting.
So, Godfather 3, it's always a difficult one for me, Godfather 3, I have to say. But I heard they've just done another cut of it.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
I did not hear that.
There was something about a new cut of Godfather 3.
I love it. I should watch it because I actually did the movie. Yeah. I only did the portion. They shot a lot of that in Italy. I did not do the Italian portion. I was a PA on the New York portion.
Right. Okay.
Pacino and I can't. It was mostly Andy Garcia, I guess it was, and his daughter Coppola, Sofia Coppola, people like that.
Yeah, I mean, again, those Pacino. Just
yeah. It was he's amazing. I mean, I did some of Carlito's Way as well with him as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how you can say that these are the movies that if you like film, you know, it's like being prodded with a spike. You just go, oh my God. It's kind of, you know, they're like less. I mean, there's a thing I saw with Pacino. So he came to London last year and he was promoting that. Is it a Netflix or Amazon? I think it's an Amazon show. Hunters or Nazi Hunters.
Yeah, Hunters are great. It's great. The Nazi Hunters. Yeah.
So he's promoting it, and what I loved about Pacino, he came on the 6 o'clock show or whatever the show's called, and it's like a magazine show, and he was sitting there, and they asked him questions about acting. And they made this cut of all these people who select, what's your favorite Pacino film? People in the street, and everyone's doing Pacino impressions from different films. Yeah. And he sat there watching it, and it was just beautiful because he was almost tearing up, enjoying the appreciation of it. You know, it wasn't about taking the piss; it was homage to such a powerful.
It is when you do him, it's homage.
It's homage, and.
So many great lines. You think right here, his voice. Yeah.
You hear, and what was lovely is he talked about the craft of acting. He didn't talk about the politics and this is my opinion and come on board with this. It was about acting. It was about his experiences, about his joy and his passion. And he's 76, 78? I don't know how old he is now. Yeah. And everyone I speak to just talks about his passion. He apparently he learns monologues just because why not?
I love that.
You know, so
I believe it too. I believe it. He's extraordinary. He really is extraordinary. To watch him, I mean, listen, certain legends are just be mesmerized every time they do anything.
And Meryl Streep was on that Marvin's Room as well. How was Meryl? She's
a goddess. I mean, I truly mean that. She is the most remarkable woman. I mean, you know what I loved about Meryl was that, hey, listen, she is truly the greatest actor alive. She's just amazing. But what I loved about her this is a while back. This is back in, this had to have been 95, I guess we did Marvin's Room. Mm-hmm. And she had young kids at the time. And I remember, so we had to fly her in from Connecticut because we were shooting Queens. So she can be with her kids in the morning. We'd take a later call and everything. We'd actually helicopter her to, and it wasn't out of pride. It wasn't out of like, I deserve a helicopter. It was truly because she wanted to make sure she was with her kids in the morning and with kids at night. So we had to make sure she was shot in a certain number of hours. So she deal with her kids in the morning, come to work, deal with her kids at night. And it was part of the deal. And we made it work and everything. Ellen did. And then, but point being is just to watch her passion for her talent was equal, actually less than her passion for her family and her kids. And I remember we were shooting next door to Sesame Street. And a bunch of us, someone said, oh, Sesame Street's next door. And it was open. The door was open. So we all, during lunch one day, snuck in and started looking around everything because who wouldn't? And out walks the guy who played Bob. Remember Bob from Sesame Street? He played the grocery, owned the grocery.
Yeah.
I can't remember the character, but
there was Bob, Mr. Hooper, who was the old man.
Yeah, and was Mr. Hooper's. He took over for Mr. Hooper,
right?
Apparently. And anyway, so the gentleman who played Bob, came out of nowhere, and he's like, "Can I help you?" And we're like, "Oh, God, it's Bob." We're like, "Oh my God, this is Bob." We're like, "Oh, we're next door doing a movie." He goes, "Are you doing that Meryl Streep movie?" And we're like, "Yeah, we are." And he said, "Is there any way I can meet her?" So we'll ask. So he goes, "Oh, if she wants to come and have a tour, I'll give her a tour and everything." And I didn't even want to go. Like, well, there's also Diane Keaton. When I was like, he was just Meryl Streep. We get there, and it was in the morning. And after lunch, we get there, and Meryl. I said, "Meryl, come here." And I said, "We're next door," and Bob was there, and she was Bob. And her face was like precious. I'm like, Bob from set is here? And I'm like, yeah. He says, they're shooting. I said, I don't know if they're shooting, but he's there. And he wants to know if he can meet us. I can meet Bob? And I'm like, hold on a second. She gets on the phone, calls her nanny, sends a helicopter to get her kids. Says, I can't do this now. I have my kids with me. Flies her kids to the stages, and she wants to go now meet Bob. So now we told Bob she's going to come over a certain time, and everyone's not making a big deal of it. And she gets her kids. Bob is like, to watch these two meet each other was the most precious thing ever, because he was like, I'm meeting Meryl Streep. But she was like, I'm meeting Bob. And it was just like, you're Meryl Streep. And she was like this kid who was meeting Bob it was just the most amazing thing. And it was just to sit there going, she was precious. I loved her. I just couldn't believe it. I just sat there going, oh my God, you're the best person ever. I mean, she really was just so excited about having her kids meet Bob. And this man had no clue that she was as equally a fan of his as he was of hers. It was just so funny.
That's amazing. The one person we haven't talked about that, I'll just get your stuff up here, which was, of course, Spielberg.
Yeah.
And, this is not, you worked with him a few times, and we're just talking about, also just on that vibe of films that if they come on television and you happen to put them on, that you can't stop watching. Catch Me If You Can is that film.
That is hands down one of my favorite movies I've ever done, let alone Spielberg movie. I was never lucky enough to be Steven's first. I was key second AD for Spielberg the 4 years. It was Sergio Mimica was his first AD, and I was actually on a film called Pay It Forward with the very talented Haley Joel Osment. And I met Haley when he was 4 years old in Forrest Gump. Haley played Forrest Gump here at the very end of Forrest Gump.
Yep.
Years later, and now I'm working on a movie with Helen Hunt and Kevin Spacey and Haley Joel Osment on Pay It Forward. And Haley was interviewing with Spielberg, and Haley and I got along great. I always get along. I always call them my kids, because all the kids I've worked with over the years are now adults now. But and I become Uncle Dave to half these kids. And Haley and Haley I love working with Haley, and he loved working with me and his dad. I love his folks, and they were just great people. And anyway, long story short, he was meeting Spielberg, and my dream was to work for Steven Spielberg, and I knew he had his AD staff and everything. And so Haley goes to have a meeting, and he said, I'm going to tell him you're my AD. I said, I don't think you could do that. So he did. He goes to Spielberg, have a meeting. At the end of the meeting, he's like, can I ask you a question? He goes, can I bring my own AD? And Spielberg, he goes, well, there's a second AD on Pay It Forward who is the best. I've known him since Forrest Gump, blah, blah, blah. And Spielberg's like, oh, that's good to know. And I'll let you. And he apparently marched down to Sergio's office and said, do you have a second? And Sergio said, no. He goes, I want you to meet this guy. And that's how I got the job. And Haley Joel Osment gave me my first Steven Spielberg job, which was amazing. And then I was lucky enough to I did AI with Steven, and then I did Minority Report with Tom Cruise with Steven, and then we did Catch Me. And then the last movie I did was with Tom Hanks called The Terminal. We did it with Tom Hanks and Catherine Zeta-Jones. And a wonderful little cast. I don't know if you've seen the movie or not. It wasn't
It's in the airport, isn't it? It's the
he plays a man from a fictional country who gets stuck at the airport. And the ironic thing was that movie was literally post 9/11, and so people were like, oh, wait a minute, this would never happen. So it was unfortunate timing to make that movie, because we were making a movie in a time that the movie would never have been made. And it was hard, because Steven almost shut the movie down, because we had a meeting with the TSA and everything, and they were like, this just wouldn't happen. No one could just wander around the airport and live in an airport in New York City. So we decided to make it pre 9/11 and not worry about 9/11 and because the actual story actually took place in France. In France at the time when it happened, their airports were like bus stations. Anyone could walk in and off, and hang out there.
Well, interesting enough, I saw a news report the other day about LAX and the amount of homeless people actually living in LAX, and they mingle in and they use the toilets and they're there.
Oh. It's crazy. It means someone's getting lax after post 9/11. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's like a huge amount of homeless people. Unbelievable. So these things they're real. It's real.
That's not good. Oy, oy, oy.
And what's he like to work with? How does he differ, and how does he operate?
He's literally, listen, when I first got in the movie business, the first thing I said is I always created a little steps along the way. And the biggest step for me was I said, someday my biggest step, my big goal was I'm going to work for Steven Spielberg. Mm-hmm. So who didn't say that? Everyone said that. But I was the kind of person, and still am the kind of person, that if I want something, I don't stop until I get it. And I was lucky enough to get that. I was lucky enough to have the relationship with Haley. But with that said, Steven is so intelligent, so creative, so passionate, but also so nice. He is, like his chair doesn't say Steven Spielberg, it says dad, or at least it did back then. He is the set dad. He is the kind of person that is so clear on what he wants but he trusts his crew. There's an immense amount of trust in the people he hires to execute his vision, but there's never a fogginess or a vagueness of what's needed or the vision or what we're going to do or what's needed. So with Steven, it's this clarity and this constant collaboration between everyone between his AD, his director of photography, his production, whomever it is, and it's wonderful because he's so clear on the day. My favorite part of the day with Steven was because I was second AD. Sergio liked showing up on Closer to Call. And I'm always, even as a first AD, I'm the guy, I'm there an hour to an hour early every day. I have to settle into my day. Mm-hmm. And as a second, I always got there early. And Steven would always get to set at least a half hour early. And he liked getting to set early. And the rule was he didn't want anybody on set, even if nothing was. So as soon as he landed, I would go in and clear everyone off the set and empty it completely. Go get coffee. Don't come on the stage. And he would come. He just wanted to walk the set, and I was allowed to stay because I was able to. I'd be the one he'd turn to and say, "So, Dave, make sure they know this, and this, and then or call for someone if you need." Anyway, so bless you. So that my favorite part of the day is to be there with him in the morning. We'd have this time, and sometimes he wouldn't say anything. Sometimes we'd have a full conversations, but it was just this amazing time to watch his brain work and start laying out the day and everything. And then he would start calling, could you ask, Janusz to come see me as DP or have Sergio come see me, whatever. And then we start the day. But I liked it because I was able to spend that time with him in the morning. And at one day he even said, he goes, what my favorite time of the day is? Because I love this half hour with you, Dave. And I'm like, oh, thanks, Steven. I really appreciate it. I love it too. But it was, you do. He's just, I'm a sponge. And to be able to have been a sponge on a Steven Spielberg set 4 times, it was the most immense experience in my life because you learn everything. He's an incredible storyteller. He's an incredible filmmaker, and there's just and you move. You swear to you, there's no lull of the day. You just move. You just get it done because he knows exactly what he wants.
And they try. I would gather that these type of guys trust the people that they work with, and so I constantly hear that getting the part is very rarely about the audition. Quite often, it's just a coffee or a meeting. And you go, you know what? I'm going to work with you for 6 months. You're worth having around. I trust you. I don't need to tell you what to do.
No, it is. I believe that with him. He has to have a relationship with people. He's also the biggest. I always said he's the Steven. Forgive me. I hope he doesn't see this, but I was called the nerd on the street who got the first swimming pool. Yeah, because he's a bit nerdy. He's a bit of a. Like he has to be part of everything. It's like someone got a toy, he had to get the toy, and it's just because which is his charm also because he wants to be part of things. He wants to be friendly and connect. He wants to be connected is the best way to put it. He wants to be connected to people. He's not this standoffish. He wants to be connected to people on a level beyond just filmmaking. And it's fun. It's charming. And, like I'll watch him. He'll be like sitting there and when we were doing the terminal, I used to care for this older man who unfortunately who lived in my neighborhood, and his son who was caring for him passed away before he did. Anyway, long story short, I was taking care of this older man who's in his 80s, his Lebanese, and I started to do the terminal, and every day I needed 600 extras. So I said, you know what, Al, I didn't know what to do with this old man because he was so lonely and everything. And so I said, tell you what, I'm going to pick you up every morning. You'd be an extra. You could be one of my extras. And I knew he was 87, was going to be, so give him a voucher, make a little money. So he came, would drive with me, and he'd come to work. And one day he wanders up and just decides, sees this man sitting behind the monitor, doesn't know who Steven Spielberg is at all, doesn't know anything. He just starts talking to Steven, and Steven loved him and got his own director's chair. And from that day on, Steven would be like, where's Al? We call him Big Al. Where's Big Al? And have Big Al sit with him. And he loved Big Al. He just loved the fact that Big Al was like, and it was just funniest thing. And it was that guy, and they sit there and he would just get, because this old man had a ton of stories of the life he lived. And Steven, of course, being a fan of history himself, it was amazing to listen to him, and also the differences, because Steven's Jewish background and his Lebanese background, and he was Lebanese Catholic, so they had a bit in common, to be quite frank with you, especially from their histories. But anyway, so point being is that he's that kind of person. And that's what I really love about him.
Fantastic. And then there's a couple of other films that you worked with Ben Stiller.
Yeah, Ben is amazing. I did. Ben was interesting. I got called on Tropic Thunder to come over and take over for a second unit. And I was supposed to be there for 3 days. I did the 3 days, and then the first AD had to go back to the States. We were shooting Hawaii. I'm sorry, not States, mainland, I should say, because we were shooting Hawaii.
Right.
So we had to go back to California, and so they asked me to step up and cover him for a couple of weeks, which I did. It turned out to be about 3 weeks. And I covered him, and I got an opportunity to work with Ben. From that, I ended up doing the reshoots on that movie, and then I got hired on both The Secret Life of Walter Mitty and Zoolander 2 with him, and I loved him. I mean, Ben had a reputation at the time of being difficult, and I heard that, and I was worried about it. I was like, I don't really want to work with difficult people, and is he tough? Absolutely, but Ben is honestly one of the most. Again, I know I keep saying this about everybody, but what I love about Ben is the fact that he was acting and directing in all the films I worked with him on. I didn't get a chance to work with him just as a director yet, and I hope I do, because he's so talented in both respects, and it's hard. And I would tell him all the time, I said, Ben, I couldn't imagine doing one of your jobs, let alone both these jobs. And the fact that you have to handle them, and we always found a balance with each other of how to help him ease get his directing mind in line, so when it's time to act, he could just act. But he's so good at it, and he's so talented, and he's such a storyteller, and he's so funny, and his instincts are incredible. And he and I got along great. And did we clash sometimes? Yeah, absolutely we did. But we never left. We were like a married couple. We never went to bed angry with each other. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like he'd always apologize, or I'd apologize, whatever was going on. But primarily, we had enough respect for each other to the point where I loved the fact that he knew he could come to me, and if he got angry and he was angry, he could use me as his venting board, and I could take it because I knew where he was coming from. And I love working with Ben Stiller. I truly loved working. I think Walter Mitty was one of the most extraordinary experiences I've ever experienced. I don't know if you've seen the movie or not. If you haven't seen it, it's called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. It was out 2000, I think.
Yep.
Maybe I'm wrong. Was it 3? Yeah, I think it was shot in 12.
He was imagining his life, and he goes off to all these different places, and it kind of happens as well. Yeah.
Amazing. Patton Oswalt, Kristen Wiig, Sean Penn, Adam Scott. I mean, just an extraordinary. But the film is really beautiful, and we shot in Shirley MacLaine was in it, and we shot in New York, all over New York, and then we went up to Iceland, and we shot Iceland for Iceland and Greenland.
Right.
And
wow.
It was, living in Iceland was we were there for a number of months, and it was just so much fun. And to be able to do that was extraordinary.
Right. I mean, the list of people that you work with, it's a dream list. It's if you just wrote it down, if you spoke to the young version of you as a PA and gave them your resume now, what would he say?
You're like, what? How do I do that? I'm like, I don't know. I don't remember. I wish I could remember how I did. I've been blessed. I've been really lucky. Listen, I've been lucky. It's all relationshipal, and relationshipal. That's not even a word, but I'm going to use it. It's all based on relationships.
Yeah.
And it's, and I've been lucky enough to form relationships that excelled me, and it gave me these step ups and everything. But I also gave myself a pat on the back too, because I I was the kind of guy that I never went half-assed anything. When I got in the business, I'm like, I want to do this, and now I want to do that. And then I would set these mini steps for myself. And I understood what the steps were, and the logical steps would be whatever in the pace of my career. And I just never sat on my laurels. And I didn't have family in this business. I didn't know anybody in this business. And every job I got, I had to earn. It wasn't like I had an uncle that was, Steven Spielberg or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, and I did, the fact is I hope at least I'm still working because people trust me to do my job, and it's not because they feel sorry for me. Could be both, but
no, I think it's
excuse me. But I tell my younger self, and I tell younger people, I do these interviews with younger people all the time. I've been doing tons of these lectures for colleges and stuff like that. And I constantly tell them all, I said, listen, have a focus on what you want to do, because the fact of the matter is that the typical response when I ask someone out of school, what do you want to do? I want to be a writer and director and producer and an actor. And I'm like, all right, okay, now how are you making money while you're doing all that? And it's, and I'm not saying, I'm never, ever going to tell anyone not to follow the dream. If you want to act, make sure you're putting the energy to acting, though. The problem is so many people start spreading their wings so far, they eventually can't can't move anywhere because they're not sure where to put their energy. And I knew I wanted to build a career, and I said, I'm willing to take these steps. And like everybody, when I got out of college, I wanted to be a director. I was going to be the next Steven Spielberg and everything. And as I built a career, I realized it wasn't going to be in the cards for me necessarily then. And it might still be, who knows? I don't know. But right now, I was lucky enough to build the career I have and live the life I have, and I work with the people I have, and that's great. But you have to be clear on what you want. And I always tell everybody, if you want to get in this business, be clear on what you want. And then once you do that, make those mini steps. Understand from where you want to go from here to here is fine, but what are all those steps along the way? Because each one of those steps is going to take a different part of time. When I first got in the business, the first thing I want to do is I want to work with movies. It took me a year to do that. Next thing I want to do is work for a certain AD. It took me about 2 years to do that. Next one is to be a second AD or second. It took me 3 years to do that, whatever. And Spielberg was 5 years later, whatever it was. You have to just make sure you're setting these goals for yourself that are reasonable and reachable. And so many people are like, I want to be the next Tom Cruise. Well, that's fine. What are the 100 steps to get to be Tom Cruise, to get to be at that level? And there's no magic bullet, and it's just work really hard. And it's for anything you do in life. It's not just movie industry, it's anything.
Yeah, I think, the way I look at it, it's a long journey in the acting world that I've been on, but, and doing things like this, I think, are reflections of your creativity, and that help. And, magic, it's difficult, like you say sometimes, that you have to be perceived that you can do, for example, be a magician, be an actor, be a presenter, be multiple things. And sometimes it's difficult to have the person think of you in a different area, different arena.
True, it is. It's very true. It's very easy to get pigeonholed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're sort of coming to a natural conclusion here. Just to finishing off, you're doing Spider-Man, which is super exciting. It must be. It's a long journey. You're on the pre-production at the moment.
Yeah.
So is that office based, or are you on set building things or creating things?
We started pre-production because of COVID. We did a lot of this version of prepping, so we would do it from home. And now we are all on office space and stage. We're at the stages, and it's everything from scouting to building sets to design of sequences, design of sets, design of costumes. All that's going on right now. And then so we're doing everything we need to do to get prepped, ready to shoot. So but yeah, there's a ton of stuff going on. And the challenge with COVID is that we're all wearing our masks on a daily basis, and it's funny, I can reach and grab one. That's how ridiculous it's become. But this is the complicated part, because it's a lot of puzzle puzzle fixing right now. It's going through puzzles and trying to fix them and solving. Puzzle solving is what I was trying to say. Mm-hmm. A lot of puzzle solving going on right now, trying to figure a lot of problems out and smooth some edges, getting the script in line. There's a lot of stuff going on that happens in prep. That is fun. I like it because the schedule, for me, it's the scheduling. I have to, if you look at I think I have my board here, but it's when you look at my office is a big calendar board, and I'm going to flash this so you can't read anything because I can't give it away, but it looks like that.
Yeah.
The calendar looks like that. And it's just a big schedule that's constantly moving around. I would like doing all my schedules on Post-its because I can move them around. And so it's fun. Right now, it's a fun part of the but we are getting close to shooting, and we're trying to. A lot of our responsibility now is also to figure the COVID of it all out as well, which we are doing.
And are there numbers of people? I mean, the terribly sad thing as well. The extras business. They're saying, "Oh, we're not going to use extras. We're not going to."
That's not true. We have to figure it out and how we're using them. It might be visual effects helping us out and things, but we're still hiring people. So I think there's a lot of panicked response to what's going on, and now the rest of us are just trying to solve a problem. The fact is you can't do movies without extras, and you do have to figure it out. And it's testing. And at the end of the day, without getting into the politics of it all, is everything is about testing. Mm-hmm. And until we can test people on a more regular basis and a more of a rapid basis, it's going to be very difficult. No, that's in you and I were talking about this earlier. It's just in every walk of life that we should be spending more time on that. And we have. And our production company is spending the money necessary, which is unfortunate, but they are, because they understand that the most important faction of anything you do is going to be safety. You want to keep everyone safe, and you don't want to be liable for being irresponsible. And so we have an amazing producing staff that's working on the film to work with us, and I'm part of the team that's coordinating the whole COVID process and protocol. And so does it add a layer of complexity and challenges? Absolutely. But like I said earlier, I'm hoping that it's going to come out of it some efficiencies that we might have been looking for in the past we never even knew we can have. And so I think we have to start looking at how we can make this work for us as opposed to letting it beat us.
Yeah, and things move forward. Things are constantly changing, and things are improving. I mean, even when they're going backwards, they're still improving. That's right. Something that I think is lied to in a sense, because it doesn't fit the negative narrative all the time, and the clickbaiting of, oh, this is terrible, when actually we're not in that lockdown. I don't think we'll ever go back to that. I think it's a different thing now, and it's like, how do we make it work, and how can we make it work? And that's the same forever. I mean, hopefully we'll be healthier because of it. And we mustn't forget that in the last pandemic, or the 1918 pandemic, you got the Roaring Twenties after it.
Yeah.
So creativity and positivity comes from it. There's some fabulous potential.
100% right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's going to come out of it too. I mean, listen, I hear a lot of things. Oh, there's a television show about COVID and movies about COVID. I'm like, I don't think anyone's going to want to see anything about COVID. So you might want to slow the roll on how many narratives you want to tell about COVID. But with that said, I think that we could come out of this with a better education on how to do things. And I think even businesses are doing it. Some businesses are going, can we approach this the way we do business in a different way? Mm-hmm. I hope we don't lose the person relationship kind of work that we do right now. And I hope that we don't rely on this to be how we communicate even in our work, but it's okay every once in a while. And it can be very productive, to be quite frank with you. I think we have to find balance between both.
Yeah, we still need to be able to, listen, how many deals are done over a drink in person? It's a really important thing.
100%.
Dave, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was fun. I love doing this.
It's brilliant. And, we've chatted on, and I think, it's really interesting to delve into these things. You don't hear about that this area of the creative business as well, and someone who's really in it. And it's fascinating.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that a lot. And I look forward to hearing this, and I'm going to keep listening to your podcast. I think it's amazing.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Pleasure.
All right. We'll end it there. That's